take to the streets of Pickering, protesting the Ford government's changes to the Greenbelt.
Doesn't matter what political stripe you are, that should make you very angry.
The rally comes just days after a scathing report from the Auditor General that found the government favored certain developers in their Greenbelt land swap. Plus,
I'm kind of relying on O-Train right now and like the transit service.
I find it's great when it's working.
relief may finally be in sight for Ottawa commuters, with news that service will resume on the full LRT Confederation line. And
for over 50 years, people have always needed laughter.
An iconic comedy institution turns 50. We look back at the storied history of the Second City, Toronto.
This is CBC Late Night News.
Good evening, I'm Farah Morali. Protesters gathered in front of Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy's office, calling for the Duffins Rouge Agricultural Preserve to be put back in protected status. It lost that status when the Ford government made changes to Greenbelt lands to spur housing development. Vanessa Balantic was at today's rally and has our top story.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, Doug Ford has got to go, hey, hey.
The message from these protesters is clear. They don't want development on land that was once part of Ontario's Greenbelt. This 17-year-old traveled from downtown Toronto to Pickering to make his voice heard.
As someone who is about to go to urban planning school, as someone who has been passionate about the environment for almost their whole life, and as someone who thinks that it is time to stop suburban sprawl, I am disgusted by what Doug Ford has been doing.
The rally comes just days after the Auditor General released a scathing report that found a group of developers influenced the housing minister's chief of staff on what parcels of land would be removed from the Greenbelt. Minister Steve Clark and Premier Doug Ford acknowledged the process was flawed, but said they were unaware of how and why specific land was chosen.
Well, we're going to follow the recommendations. One of the recommendations were to have the Integrity Commissioner look into it. I know he's in the process of been doing that.
The one recommendation from the Auditor General they're not following, to reevaluate the decision to change the Greenbelt boundaries. That's part of why protesters took to Pickering today, where almost 2,000 hectares of prime farmland in the Duffins Rouge Agricultural Preserve were removed from the Greenbelt.
Well, our big message today is to tell MPP Peter Bethlenfalvy that he needs to stand up for people in Pickering.
Look at what's happening right now with natural disasters. It's because we're upsetting the natural balance of the planet, and we're not respecting the boundaries. And that also extends to our province here.
In a statement, the Premier's office told CBC Toronto, for nearly 20 years, the city of Pickering has advocated for removing these lands. It went on to say these changes will support the construction of at least 50,000 new homes while growing the Greenbelt. While protesters say they understand the need for housing, they don't think using Greenbelt land is the right way to do it.
Young people cannot afford to buy a home. And really, this government, this PC government and Doug Ford, they are wasting our resources and our time to address this by handing over and gifting rich developers.
Protesters say they'll keep the fight going with rallies like these to pressure the Ford government to reverse course. Vanessa Balantek, CBC News, Toronto.
In other news tonight, a Scarborough man has died after drowning in Lake Ontario in Cobourg yesterday. OPP says they were called to the east side of the pier in Cobourg shortly after 4 p.m. after reports of a person in distress in the water. Police say the person went underwater and did not resurface. Emergency crews searched the waterways and found a 25-year-old man. He was rushed to hospital where he died. 2 men and a child were injured in a targeted shooting in downtown Toronto last night.
We're all taken to local hospitals. 2 of the victims were men, one in their 50s, one in their 80s. They are both in serious but non-life-threatening condition. One of the victims was a child under the age of 5. They have superficial injuries.
It happened around 6 p.m. near Princess Street and the Esplanade. Police believe this was a targeted incident and there was no ongoing threat to the community. Investigators are looking for a male suspect in a dark-colored vehicle with dark rims. It was last seen heading east on Front Street. He's described as tall with a thin build, wearing all black clothing. Anyone with information is being asked to contact police. Meanwhile, in North York, 5 people were taken to hospital after a serious collision yesterday. Police were called to Shepherd Avenue in Bathurst just before 6 p.m. after reports of a crash involving 2 vehicles and 3 pedestrians. Officers say a black Subaru turning left on Bathurst collided with a black Volkswagen. The Volkswagen then veered off the road and struck 3 pedestrians who were on the corner of the sidewalk. One of those pedestrians was taken to hospital in critical condition. The 2 other pedestrians and both drivers were taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. To Ottawa now, where there is some relief ahead for commuters starting tomorrow. OC Transpo confirming tonight after successful testing over the weekend, service will be resuming tomorrow on the full Confederation line.
My bike just broke, so I'm kind of relying on O-Train right now and like the transit service.
I live in that apartment there. I come down here, I'm outside for like 2 seconds, and then I'm on a train. It really feels like you don't leave your house, like you're connected to the mall. But that's only when it's working.
The system was shut down on July 17th after a routine inspection uncovered a bearing issue. Service resumed last week on a portion of the LRT line. R1 replacement buses service will still run alongside the trains Monday, but that will end on Tuesday. We spoke to one transit riders advocate who says she'd like to see the replacement buses continue for longer.
So even if it works fairly well for a little while in August, once September hits, and I mean, that's the real new year in Ottawa, students are back to school, there are new people in the city, there are people coming back from holidays. That's when the real challenge is going to be. And I would really like to see them hold on to the R1 as a redundancy for a little while.
An update on restoring regular service with 2-car trains is expected in September. Staying in Ottawa, about 200 cyclists hit the streets yesterday, in part to protest comments made by Mayor Mark Sutcliffe on social media. Last week, he mused about letting vehicles once again use a stretch of Queen Elizabeth driveway during the summer. The National Capital Commission has been cordoning off the road between Somerset and 5th so that cyclists and pedestrians can use it instead.
The mayor's comments did bring a lot more people's attention to the importance of preserving what we have, and we really should be getting to increasing, not decreasing, the amount of active transportation corridors in Ottawa.
Sutcliffe has cited concerns about emergency vehicle access and congestion on nearby streets. He has called for the National Capital Commission to open the stretch of Queen Elizabeth from 5th Avenue to the Pretoria Bridge. A COVID subvariant that is on the rise around the world could be more infectious, but health experts say there's no indication the strain called EG.5 causes more serious illness than previous ones. For more on this, we spoke with infectious diseases specialist Dr. Isaac Bogosh. We asked him to explain how the subvariant compares to other strains.
It's distinct. Yes, it's clearly a bit more transmissible, and we're seeing certain parts of the world have uptick in cases and, of course, associated hospitalizations, but it's not vastly different from XBB that we saw earlier. We just can't ignore that a ton of Canadians have been infected and recovered from infection, and that combination of vaccination plus recovery from infection has really provided us with pretty significant community level protection against more severe manifestations of the virus. Of course, there's people among us we obviously need to protect and care for that are at greater risk, but we won't see the scenes that we saw much earlier in the pandemic.
Sophia Kambalia joins us now for your first look at the forecast. Sophia, quite the series of weather patterns this weekend.
Yes, well, let's start with relaying the events from what was really that stormy Saturday. We can now confirm it was a tornado that came through the Caledonia area just after the breakfast hour with winds in excess of 115 kilometers an hour, a 5-kilometer damage path near that Hamilton area city, broken tree branches and snapped stems. It was just the icing on the cake, though, because it was a really active day, really, for the entirety of Saturday. That tornado, also a gust tornado, which we showed you on the show yesterday, basically a tornado on water near the Wasaga Beach shores. Really heavy, potent hail, including massive softball size hail, actually 9 centimeters. Yeah, look at that. You wouldn't want that falling anywhere near you. Now, after the passage of this very potent cold front throughout the weekend, Monday is much calmer and cooler in the atmosphere, as you can imagine, a couple degrees below seasonal. Clouds will move in late day Monday as a system is brewing again into the deep south. It will be your story Monday overnight into Tuesday into parts of southwestern Ontario with some heavy showers. And then Tuesday morning will be a rainy commute anywhere from Niagara to north and east of the city. The rain will continue late day Tuesday as well. Things calm down for Wednesday, but coming up in the long range, I'll tell you about the next bout of active weather late week.
All right, thanks, Safia. It has been a busy week at the National Bank Open, but we finally have some winners. In Toronto, Italian Yannick Sinner took home his first Masters Series title, while American Jessica Pegula won her third Premier level title in Montreal. Ed Kleiman takes us through both matches.
It's not very often that you see a tennis match won in 49 minutes. And there's a real story behind this, and that was the weather in Montreal. They've had so much rain there. So yesterday, while Jessica Pegula got through her semifinal match, no problem during the afternoon, there was a semifinal match to go at night, and those two players, they got rained out. They had to come back at 1:30 in the afternoon in Montreal and play a tough semifinal. And Ludmila Samsonova got the big upset win over Elena Rybakina. But all she got as a reward was 2 hours of rest before she had to come out and play Pegula, and she had nothing left in the tank. So this was really easy for Jessica Pegula, and unfortunately for Samsonova, she's hoping this is an experience she never has to do again in her tennis career.
Staying with tennis, and a tough break for Canadian star Bianca Andreescu. Another injury has forced her to withdraw from the upcoming Cincinnati Open. Andreescu says she has a small stress fracture in her back. She said she experienced pain during her first round loss at the City Open back at the end of July. The Mississauga, Ontario native said the back pain became worse in her first round loss at the National Bank Open on Tuesday. Andreescu says her main focus now will be on resting her back and says she's staying optimistic for the U.S. Open. That tournament kicks off at the end of this month. Looking back now to a day many longtime residents of this province will remember. Tomorrow marks the 20th anniversary of the Great North American Blackout. It saw major cities like Toronto go completely dark. In total, 50 million people in Canada and the northeastern U.S. lost power. We dug deep into our archives to bring you some of the scenes from 2003 and this press conference by then Toronto Mayor Mel Lastman.
Public has been outstanding. No one losing, or very few, if any, losing their temper. The public are pitching in. They're really helping. They're directing traffic. And I was telling the chief, he should have some of his scouts out looking at them, because maybe you can use them in future. They'd be great volunteers.
The blackout hit just after 4 p.m. on August 14, 2003, after a Cleveland power station sent a cascade of problems to over 100 plants on this side of the border, impacted many other cities in this province, including Ottawa, Kingston, Sudbury, Kitchener, London, and Windsor, causing traffic chaos and bringing subways to a standstill. Power was restored in most regions the next day. You can't talk comedy in this country without mentioning the name Second City Toronto. The iconic theatre has given rise to countless comedy heavyweights over the years, and this weekend it's marking its 50th anniversary. Our Patrick Swadden takes a look at its legacy and how the venue has changed over the years.
You may have heard of them: Dan Aykroyd, Catherine O'Hara, or even Mike Myers. But did you know they all came through this place? Now the premier Canadian improv institution, Second City Toronto is celebrating its 50th anniversary.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing because it proves that what we're doing, it's working.
From its humble 1973 beginnings on Adelaide Street to changing homes over the years, it's now settled in a new location at 1 York Street. But Second City has always been a factory for the funny.
For over 50 years, people have always needed laughter, whether they need it to celebrate something or they need it to get over something or get through something. Comedy really keeps us going in tough times or in good times.
And while it's been making Canadians laugh for decades, it's also helped elevate Canadian comedians to international fame.
I hope you wake up so stiff you can't even move.
The likes of John Candy, Eugene Levy, and of course Dave Thomas of Bob and Doug McKenzie Acclaim. And that's something the theater is celebrating with its 50 years of funny show.
In that show, you can actually see scenes that were originally performed by the original cast from the 1970s, including John Candy and Eugene Levy.
And while celebrating the past, Second City is also paving the way for the next generation of Canadian performers.
I grew up watching SCTV, and when I was looking at my career path, I was like, what do I want to do? I want to do what they're doing. I want to make people laugh. I want to perform just like Catherine O'Hara or Andrea Martin, who were my idols growing up.
Victoria Kuchar started at Second City's Improv for Actors program and is now sharing the stage with those idols.
I can honestly say the day I got cast in Schitt's Creek, I cried. Eugene Levy sat down right next to me. And my story is that he started schooling me on what makes comedy funny. So I actually got a lesson from the great one in comedy.
Second City's new home has 3 full stages, including one with the original floor from the 1973 Fire Hall, performed on by comedy legends. Second City is now looking to cultivate comedy for the next 50 years.
It's a lovely responsibility for the brand and for the organization to be able to create space for these amazing new voices that we know are going to go on to great things.
Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Toronto.
We want to take you next to a park in Toronto's Weston neighborhood that's playing host to a Shakespeare-inspired production told through an Indigenous lens. Otaheyu follows the story of Othello, but is set in 1816 during the fur trade era. Though it takes place hundreds of years ago, there are themes that will resonate with audience members. I had a chance to sit down with the director and a cast member to dig a bit deeper. This production has been described as kind of a reimagining of the classical Shakespeare play Othello. Set the scene of Otaheyu for us.
Otaheyu is an incredible story about a very strong woman who is the leader of her community during the era of the fur trade.
I did not yet know that swimming came to you as easily as singing.
That is kind of reciprocal to Othello in a way. Othello was a black man, and Otaheyu here is an Indigenous Cree Métis woman.
For the clouds are made of ash and they cover the earth round. They cover the earth round. And in the clutches of the fur trade, those that would market the year of no summer, the year of no summer around the world.
Basically, Otaheyu happens during the year of no summer when this huge volcano erupted in Indonesia and created a vast cloud of smoke across the sky. So at the time, especially during the fur trade era, it created a lot of distress for the people and a lot of panic and worry.
Or will betrayal win his heart?
Jonathan, you play the character of Hamish, who is sort of an alternate take of Iago from Othello. Tell me a little bit more about Hamish.
So, the quintessential Shakespeare villain. I love Iago. I've dreamt of playing Iago since theater school. Villains are very complex. It's almost easy to write them off like, oh, they're bad people, but why? I think that's the more interesting thing about it. And then you transition it into Hamish, where he has this other level of being Indigenous. In my particular iterance of Hamish, not looking Indigenous, wanting to fit into this world of colonized life.
Having an outdoor space is really fun. I'm just excited that the show is free for anybody to come see. It was so fascinating because we were outside and there were noises happening and birds, squirrels, honking horns. People. There was all that chaos happening around us. But I remember at one point looking around at the audience and everyone was so intensely quiet, just watching and listening. And so I was really proud of that.
A little taste of Italian culture in Mississauga, just west of Toronto, where crowds have gathered for the 11th annual Mississauga Italfest, featuring live music, dancing, Italian food, and a variety of vendors. Last year, more than 30,000 people came out to the festival. Sophia Kambalia joins us once again for a look at your extended forecast. Sophia, how's next week shaping up weather-wise?
Farah, thanks for that. All in all, really, it's going to be a pretty stable week around seasonal, but yes, there are a few bouts of active weather. Let's talk about Monday first. A little bit below seasonal, but much calmer after the stormy Saturday that we had. Clouds will build in late day Monday, though, and that's when the next system comes in. Overnight Monday, the rain will be there for those of you in southwestern Ontario. And by Tuesday morning, it's a rainy commute all across the GTA, and actually bouts of rain even into late day Tuesday all over the southern Great Lakes Basin. Wednesday, though, is your real stable day of the work week. Back up to seasonal pretty much, and plenty of sunshine. Enjoy it while you can, because Thursday, the next system is brewing for those of you in parts of northwestern Ontario. And this one will have real fall storm vibes. Gusty, a bit cooler, a potent cold front, a lot of wind, especially around any of the lakeshores for those of you in northwestern Ontario. It makes its way down to the southern Great Lakes Basin Thursday night into Friday. With a bit of rain as well, not as much as you would have seen on Tuesday for many of you. But Friday will be the windy and cooler day for many in parts of the GTA as well. And then we look ahead to next weekend. Stable, warmth, hopefully it stays that way, but we are expecting in the long range, especially for next week, a ridge of high pressure to build in from the deep south that will bring us back to more of those typical dog days of summer-like temperatures, and I'll be back next week with that full forecast. Mara.
All right, thanks, Sophia. That is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Farah Morali. Before we go, though, we will take you to the Taste of the Danforth, the iconic 3-day festival, wrapping up tonight after coming back to the city for the first time since before the pandemic, giving visitors a chance to take in some of Greektown's delicious food, check out some of the vendors, and live music. Have a great night.